This is sort of a picture of this data. Along the other side here, I can label frequencies. 16, it's 34, and then obviously I can fill in the rest of the numbers as I wanted to. But one way that I can display this type of data using graphs, pictures. All right. Now, we'll get a little bit more into this in a few minutes. Let's talk, before we get into this, let's talk back here on this shark attack data. Now, this data, again, we talked about, this data is categorical. Another important reason to identify what type of data you have is because that type of data sort of dictates what kind of pictures you can draw, what kind of graphs there are out there available to you to present this data. With categorical data, there are two main types of graphs that we utilize. The two main types of graphs we use for categorical data are bar charts, and the other one are pie graphs, or pie charts. These are the two primary ways that we present categorical data. Why? Well, the pie chart one and the pie graph one is pretty easy. Pie graphs are made up of bunches of pieces. Okay? Categorical data is data that fits into individual categories. It's easy to associate each of those categories with a piece of the pie. Okay? So pie graphs and categorical data, they go together a lot. They are friends. Go out on the weekends and have parties. But, they're one way that we can display categorical data. Bar charts. Bar charts are, again, sort of as the name describes, we use bars to represent each of the data's values. We can take this data here and we can create a bar chart in a very similar way to what we did here. There are some subtle differences. Okay? A bar chart has the categories listed across the bottom. If we're going to create a bar chart with this data, how many bars are we going to have? 7. Okay? So there are 7 bars. Okay? Again, across the bottom are all of our regions. So our first region, Florida. Then we're going to have a Hawaii. Then we'll have a California, and Australia, Brazil, South Africa, and then other. To construct this bar chart, we need this frequency table. It tells us how tall to make each of our individual bars. In this case, we're going to use this data, this frequency column, to figure out how tall each of our bars should be. The Florida bar, 365. There's 365 answers there, so I'm going to make it the tallest, as obviously there are the most values in that particular category. So there's our first one. Now, if you want to, at this point, you go over here and you say that's 365. And this vertical distance represents the frequency of our particular category. Hawaii, well, now Hawaii is only 60, so that's what, about a sixth of the size? Right? It's not a sixth. Right about there. There's Hawaii. And I keep going. And I try to make my bars as proportionate to this one as I can based on their relative size. And that's all that a bar chart is. It's just a graphical picture of this frequency table. California, slightly less than the Hawaii one. Australia, 94. You see, that's like right there. Brazil, 66. South Africa, 76, a little taller. And then finally the other, like that. All right. And there it is. There is a bar chart for our region of attacks of sharks. Pretty straightforward. No mathematical trickery, no sort of real complicated rules to follow. All we do is we create our frequency table and then we translate all of this into pictures like we have here. All right, pie graphs, again, pie graphs, you can use this same frequency table. You're going to do the exact same thing, except now you have to worry about everything fitting into your pie evenly. Okay? This is where the proportion part comes into play, because you need to make sure that each of your pie pieces has the appropriate proportion in it. Doing this stuff by hand is really out of date. All of you grew up in a technological world. I hope when you lived in caves or anything. You've probably been exposed to computers for most of your lives. Most computer programs have ways of creating all of these things for you. What you have to do is you have to be able to put the data in. You have to be able to tell it what data is important and how to utilize it. Okay. Pie graph of something like this. I will draw one for the sake of having it. Color. Yep. All right, so big circle. That represents the pie. And now we break it up so each of these is represented there somewhere. Okay. This piece being the 0.385, and then everything else accordingly. About the 6.3, about the 4.2, 0.9, 0.7, 0.8, and then 0.261. Okay? Now, if you're going to construct a pie chart, again, this is a very bad example of constructing a pie chart because all I have is a bunch of pieces up here, not really anything, sort of describing what each piece represents. But if you're doing something like this, it's always good to include some sort of legend that tells us what each of the individual pieces is associated with. There are drawbacks to using pie charts, as we will talk about later on in the course. But they are one of the tools that we have available to us to display categorical data, and so we should at least be exposed to them and know what they are and how they play an important role in statistics. Right. Now, these are the graphical summaries. We've seen graphical pictures of categorical data. What else is important in talking about categorical data? What other summaries can we get from categorical data? What kind of other summaries, besides having these pictures, how else can we analyze categorical data? What else is important when we're talking about categorical data like this? What else can we see that we should focus on? Not an easy question, I understand. But some of the things that we should focus on when dealing with categorical data is the highest frequencies. What categories have the highest frequencies? What else can we look at here? What else is important in categorical data? Well, relative frequencies is also important. Again, all a relative frequency is how often does this one occur in relation to the others. That's another thing that we are interested in with